to WASA Distance Education. My name is Greg Weaver, and this is ENG4E Grade 12 Workplace English. I'd like to welcome everyone listening across the North Bay at home, your learning center, or on Bell Express U. To call and join our class and call 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017 or 2983 in the Sioux Lookout, Lac Seul, or Dryden areas. I'd like to welcome everyone back to class today. We are going to be looking at lesson number 8 today, as well as continuing to read our course novel as well. So we are picking up, we're in the middle of chapter 20 in our course novel. You can find the page that we're at on page 154. So look at page 154, page 20, chapter 20. So we'll read that, and we'll also look at chapter 21 as well. So we're up to page 171 in the course novel today, before you get into looking at our material for lesson number 8. So we ended off, in case you couldn't join us last time, we ended off looking at chapter 20. So far, Tiffany and Tony have broken up. Tony was cheating on her, so they have broken up. Her dad discovered that she'd been hiding a progress report in her room, and as well, that got very upset at her for that as well. So she came home after bringing up fight to and found out that she had to talk to her dad in the morning. She did, and this is where we're at in the novel. So we're at the top of page 158, or bottom page 158. If you're reading along online, you can see we're at the top of that second page there on the right. And it starts off, "You can't be serious. Keith is going to make Tiffany wash his dirty truck." Keith let her go. She jumped down to the steps to turn on the outdoor faucet. "Tiffany, I want you to wash the truck. Now." He was serious, thought Tiffany, as she rubbed the circulation back into her right arm. "You always take it to the car wash in town. This is just being mean to me, isn't it? It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's freezing outside. I'll get pneumonia or something. You've got to learn responsibility." He put the hose in the bucket, and he could hear the water filling up. "I'll learn responsibility by washing a beat-up Ford pickup?" Tiffany asked sarcastically. "Just do it, Tiffany," Keith responded as he returned to re-enter the house. "Or what?" yelled his daughter. "You'll drive me away like you drove away Mom and—" "I don't want to hear about your mother," Keith yelled, half in the house. "Your mother left." "I didn't drive her away." "Well, something did. She didn't just decide, 'Hey, I think I'll leave my family and move to Edmonton,' out of nowhere." Granny Ruth quietly appeared at the window of her bedroom. She could see her son and granddaughter arguing again right below, but they seemed too preoccupied to notice her. This fight seemed bigger than the other ones, but she knew this moment was long in coming. Though it had to happen on a Sunday morning of all days, now that was disrespectful. Keith turned around. This was dangerous territory, they both knew it. But they were there. There was no off-ramp. "She left because she wasn't happy. I tried." For the first time in a long time, Tiffany stood toe-to-toe with her father. They were equals in pain and anger. She wasn't happy. You just sat there watching television. You just sit there watching television. "Yeah, I hate her for leaving, but she will give it left. She was a reason to stay. I gave her every reason to stay, but instead she ran off with that white guy. Wasn't part of this till she left. You know that. Mom wasn't like that." "You're defending her?" Tiffany paused for a moment. After so months of blaming her mother, here she was defending her. Yeah, I guess I am. Yeah, well, I don't care. She made her choice. Don't want to talk about this anymore. Now, once in your stupid life, do what you're told. Keith was desperately angry, and so was Tiffany. There it is again. You think I'm stupid, don't you? Keith stopped moving. He didn't say anything. Tiffany was silent too. All I could hear was the bucket overflowing with water. For a second, it seemed like all the animals in the forest paused to see where this confrontation would end up. It was Keith who broke the silence. His voice was cold and measured. Tiffany, as the guy who feeds you, who clothes you, and puts a roof over your head, I think you have the right to expect a certain amount of proper behavior. Running off in the middle of the night to meet that white boy isn't very respectful. If you don't show me any respect, then I've got little reason to show you any. Like you said, Dad, it's a two-way street. Kids are supposed to learn from their parents. Yeah, I'm learning lots. Tiffany jumped down, grabbed the garden hose. She put her thumb over the opening and sprayed the truck. Keith watched her for a moment before commenting coldly. You are so much like your mother. Barely acknowledging him, Tiffany continued to blast away at the dirty vehicle. She didn't know when to be quiet either. Granny Ruth held her breath. That had come out of nowhere, but had landed up as a bullseye. Silently, she prayed to the guest downstairs was sound asleep, missing the unfolding drama. Keith paused, realizing that he had crossed some invisible line. But it had to be said, nothing could be taken back. All the king's horses and all the king's men. Tiffany dropped the hose. It fell at her feet and lay there. Off in the distance, a crow cawed. And if laughing at them, I guess you know why she left, huh? Before he knew what he was saying, Keith responded, best thing she ever did. Now finish washing the truck. Tiffany raised her eyes to look directly at her father's. Dad, I am sick of all of this garbage. Everywhere I turn, something is always happening around me. I'm just 16 years old, and probably got another 50 or 60 years of misery ahead of me. And right now, the only thing I'm sure of is I can't take it anymore. What's that supposed to mean? Asked Keith. Tiffany started walking away, leaving the dirty truck, Keith, and the rest of her crappy life behind. I'm tired and I'm pissed off, and I'm frustrated and mad, and everything else. I just want it all to go away. I want to go away. Fearing it would be some sort of emotional ploy to gain sympathy, Keith was reluctant to back down. Don't talk like that. You're just overreacting. Without looking back, Tiffany ran to the wooded trail, her voice hanging in the early morning mist. You'll be sorry, Dad. Grades or no grades. You and Tony and Mom and everybody else can all compare notes at the funeral. Just chalk it up to me being stupid. She disappeared into the forest wall, leaving behind a few swaying branches she brushed against in her flight. Hearing her words and understanding their meaning chilled Tiffany's father to the bone. He jumped down off the steps and went running towards the path, yelling, Tiffany! Tiffany! But it was too late. She was gone, off on one of the little side trails. He spent the rest of the day searching for her without success. In her room, Granny Ruth sat in her bed, fretting and worrying about her granddaughter. She tried to knit but couldn't concentrate. She quit for making too many mistakes and went back to looking out her window. In the basement, where their guest room sat occupied, all was silent, like a tomb. Chapter 21. Granny Ruth was frantic. 12 hours had passed, and no sign of Tiffany. Keith and his mother had phoned everybody they knew and who knew Tiffany, desperately searching the community for a sign she was all right. But nobody had seen her, and as the hours passed, their apprehension increased, especially since there was some disturbing gossip about the disappearance of Dale Morris and Chucky Gimu. Although she had never had any fondness for the two boys, they were still part of the community. And like a domino effect, if something happens to one person, it could happen to a lot of other people. Her granddaughter was one of those people. Dale and Chucky's car had been found abandoned down by the lake, near the landing where fishermen put their boats into the water. There was no sign of them in the vehicle except for some chewing tobacco and saliva residue on the front dash and steering wheel, plus pee stains on the driver's seat for some bizarre reason. That was the night before last, and the police officers had been to the shack, and there was some bagged pot. The place looked abandoned. Everybody knew these boys would never leave either the car or the grass to be found so obviously. Something was wrong. And now Tiffany was missing too, though her disappearance was powered by her own legs. Keith was feeling guilty, and Granny Ruth knew it. Several times during the day, she had tried to soothe her son, but with little luck. He was practically out of his mind with worry. She'll come home, my son. She's got a temper, run into the family. But she's also got a good head on her shoulders. Maybe she just needs a good cry. I sometimes just want to run away and have a good cry, but these old legs won't let me. But she too was worried about her granddaughter's implied threat. Maybe it gets dark and she gets hungry. It had been dark for more than an hour, and both lunch and dinner had come and gone without Tiffany's presence. Granny Ruth repeatedly placed calls to all of Tiffany's friends, but they swore up and down they had not heard from her and would call as soon as they did, regardless of whether Tiffany wanted them to or not. So there she sat, looking out the window, wishing desperately to see a certain Anishinaabe girl running up the front path. Angry or happy, they accept her anyway. She thought of her son in his truck driving up and down all the roads in the reserve, as he'd been doing all afternoon. It was a big region, sparsely populated in some places, and there was plenty of room for an opinionated and stubborn teenager to hide, if she wanted. A man in a pickup truck randomly driving down the back roads was worse than looking for a needle in a haystack. This needle did not want to be found. Granny Ruth had seen her real goal from growing up in a house where only Anishinaabe was spoken, and the outhouse crawled with spiders and flies, to a school where teachers tried to beat all the Indian ways out of her, to today where anything native was at a premium. People even being paid good money to do all sorts of native things. She knew people who were always being interviewed and asked to speak in all things native. It was mostly those who didn't really know that much that seemed to make it all the attention. Life truly was a circle. Granny Ruth was old and she knew it, but she had few regrets and few remaining dreams. Drained by the worry and the anxiety of the day, she was drifting off into an uneasy slumber as the door downstairs opened slowly. In her sleep, she dreamed of faraway times, and times closer to now. As always, the people in her dreams talked in Anishinaabe. Her parents, her beloved husband, and her two departed children, Paula and Philip, all speaking the same language as their ancestors. Her mind drank in each and every indigenous word it could. It was the only time she heard the language anymore in her dreams. As it often happened, she talked back to them in Anishinaabe too, mumbling in her sleep, barely coherent. She was a little girl again. Being told by her own grandmother about the bad and impish things roaming out in the forest. The Nodway creatures from the south that steal bad little children, though secretly she thought it was just another word for the Iroquois. The long ago mortal enemies of Anishinaabe. The Wendigos, monsters from the north who were cannibals with insatiable appetites that grew and grew the more they ate. The little people, mischievous beings to be wary of who lived in the forest, meadows, or along lake shores, or other sort of creatures. The mythology of Anishinaabe was full of them. A shadow fell across her sleeping form as she twitched in her chair. and had hovered there for a moment, watching her. The girl had been nice to him. Everybody else was staying away from young Anishinaabe because he was dying. Nobody told him this to his face, but he didn't have to. He had something called measles. And while these white people usually recovered, even as children, for some reason it fed more strongly than Owl's people. He had been ill for it for 4 days. It's since been quarantined. Yet another new word to learn. In a remote part of the palace. Only this young girl, he had found out her name was Anne, was brave enough to tend to him in his feverish and spotted state. Day after day. She brought him fresh sheets, bathed him with cool water, and tried to feed him. Sometimes he could eat, most times not. Yet she stayed there with nobody else would come. Even though it was obvious he was not going to recover, she still came. A smile on her face, and her arms full of things to make him feel better. If he had been healthier and more fit, maybe he would have fallen in love with her. Instead, he was merely grateful for this country did not contain demons and liars. They found it hard for to talk, but she spoke some remote dialect of French, and he had another used by sailors. All I could make was that it was her Christian duty, and she was a palace servant girl. That was enough for him, as she repeatedly dozed off to sleep during the cool baths that kept his fever down. Then, that final night, when his body was failing him, he knew it was time for him to join his ancestors. Something strange and wonderful happened. The girl had long since gone to her own chambers to sleep, so Al was all alone. Somehow, he managed to crawl to his feet and stagger over to the window, looking down over the courtyard. Opening it, Al wanted to look westward, to where the moon was setting. That was where his people were. He would die looking in the direction of home, a place he never should have left. How long he had been sitting on the window ledge, he had forgotten. But by this time he was passing in and out of consciousness. One of the last two memories he had was of the young girl, Anne. Maybe he had fallen in love with her after all. And then to die, the irony made a sore throat manage a small laugh. His very last memory was of something coming in through the windows, darting across his legs as he sat there, barely conscious. Whatever it was, it had red eyes and sharp teeth. And that was the last image he had of that night and of that life. The late evening peace was suddenly shattered by the ring of the phone. Startled, Granny Ruth groggily reached for the phone and hung on the wall behind her. Before he reached it, her pure head was already on it. Delicately, he lifted it and handed it over to the small woman. "It's private for you," he said with a smile. For a second, Granny Ruth thought she could see something odd about his teeth, before his smile quickly vanished. "Oh, you're up, thank you." She took the phone, shaking the cobwebs of her still sleeping mind. "Hello?" Pierre sat down in the seat in front of her, a curious look on his face. Though he'd only been in the house a brief period, he had already assessed the pattern of life among these people. Now it seemed to have been broken. Dishes left over from the morning not washed. The kitchen looking uncharacteristically still in use. And Granny Ruth looked tired and worried. Something was not amiss. Not that Pierre cared. It was just something he noticed. "No, Keith, she hasn't shown up yet. I think we should call the police." They perked up Pierre's ears. Police and people like Pierre didn't mix well. There was always questions that he would prefer not to answer, and prolonged periods of time where his control of his strange environment could be taken away from him, and unwanted attention could come his way, and this definitely could complicate matters. He cocked an inquiring eyebrow at the elder across the hill from him. His acute hearing could even the distance make out what Keith's voice was said over the phone. Evidently he had flagged down Officer Kaina, the reserve cop, who had said she had been out for the teenager during her patrols. Meanwhile, Keith was going to continue his search with much reserve as he could. He urged Granny to call Tiffany's friends once more, then he hung up. "Trouble?" Pierre inquired. "Oh, just a bit. That Tiffany. She and her father had got into a fight this morning, and she's gone and run off. We were looking for her for a better part of the day. She said some scary stuff when she ran off, so we're kind of concerned." That was obvious. Full of nervous energy, she got up for a chair and started stacking plates, but one fell over her hand and smashed on the floor. Granny Ruth stopped moving, though her body still trembled. Slowly Pierre got down on one knee and started to pick up the pieces. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just a bundle of nerves. I don't know what I'm doing. The old man seemed confused. Without looking up, Pierre made a suggestion. Why don't you make some tea? What a wonderful idea. Tea. I'll make some tea. Now with a definite and attainable purpose. Granny Ruth puttered, engaged in a flurry of tea-making activity. Pierre gathered the last of the plate shards. Once the kettle was on the stove, she got out 2 cups from the cupboard, placed them on the table. She immediately noticed this and debated objecting. As next came the milk and sugar. Really, it was a soft thump. She sat back down at the kitchen table and started pre-mixing her teacup. I can tell how you made cups of tea in this house I grew up in. Probably have to fill that lake, including the tea that followed. Every once in a while, Tiffany and one of her friends would try to give me those herbal flavor teas everybody's drinking these days. But not for me. Give the good old red rose orange pico tea every time. Tea just won't be tea without my red rose. You're going to try and put milk in some of the herbal teas? It just goes sour just like that. And she snapped her fingers to illustrate her point. Do you drink any tea where you come from, Pierre? Tea's very big in England. They even have a part of the day put aside for it. Small talk was never one of Pierre L'Errant's strong survival skill. But he was nothing if not adaptable. Yeah, I heard that somewhere. The white people have a time to put aside practically everything. Tea, meetings, when I go to the bathroom. Can you believe it? Oh, listen to me babble. I'm an old woman with a lot of history in my brain. Sometimes it leaks through. She checked on the kettle, but couldn't help looking at the window again. Oh, Tiffany, where are you? Once more, I could only hear the sound of the ticking in the kitchen. Perhaps I should. The kettle started to sing, and she quickly turned it off, brought it to the table, as she'd done tens of thousands of times before. As before, he started to object, but the same result. Oh, no, thank you. I have to eat nonsense. You need a good cup of tea. With all these weird hours you keep, God knows what you're eating. To tell you the truth here, you ain't looking so good. I'm concerned. It was true. Pierre wasn't feeling very well. He felt weak and uncomfortable. He hadn't felt like this in a long time. Like all hungry beings, part of him was screaming to be let out to do what it did naturally. It craved. And it was beastly strong. Pierre was doing everything in his power to keep control of himself and his body's wants. He had maybe one more day, if that, then his corporal essence would eventually overcome his willpower. Unlike normal human beings, what made Pierre Lair different was the ability to satisfy its needs if the mind wouldn't let it. There was another reason he didn't appear too healthy. Self-denial was a very strenuous activity, one that required great energy that was currently coming from nowhere. His body was beginning to feed on itself, which confused the instincts that he allowed him to survive for an ungodly length of time. Those same instincts told him food was a scant distance away on the other side of the table. Granny smiled softly at him and poured the steaming liquid into the teapot. Hope regular milk's fine. I ain't got none of that skim milk stuff. He forced another smile. That'll be fine. He went through the motion to pick up the milk and add a couple of drops to his empty cup. I see him do in England. Mixing with a spoon, he added some sugar like seeing Granny Ruth do. Pierre smiled pleasantly. Tea's as different as the people who drink it. I know, we used to have all kinds of medicinal teas. There was a tea that allowed those French explorers to survive the winters all those years. Cured them. What was it called? The scurvy. Full of vitamin C, I'm told. A cedar tea. Granny was surprised. Yes, that was it. How do you know that? I read a lot. Puzzled but impressed, Granny Ruth poured the tea. Pierre sniffed at it. Its pleasant aroma was more reminding him of the time he had spent in Britain. Granny Ruth also savored the smell of the tea before drinking it with a wink towards the tenant. With her eyes on, he raised the cup to his mouth and pretended to sip it, letting the liquid barely touch his lips. Delicious, he said. I make good tea, don't I? She smiled proudly and added, Hey, come with me. She got out of her seat and made her way across the living room. Pierre, puzzled, had no choice but to follow. Opening the screen door, she urged the guests out onto the back deck. Let's enjoy our tea out here. There were 4 wooden chairs scattered around the smallish deck that in need of varnishing. Granny Ruth lined up too, with cushions facing east. With a definite sigh, she sat down. We went to watch the moonrise. Used to be much more of a night-out person like you when I was young. Now I get tired so early. Enjoy your youth while you can, Pierre. There'll come a day, young man, when you will be going to bed with the sun. Mark my words. Pierre didn't say anything. He pretended to take another sip. As always, he could hear the animals of the forest going about their nightly business, hunting for food, both animal and vegetable. That's all, he sometimes thought the night was good for. The old woman breathed in the air and sat back. She was still worried about her granddaughter and where she might be. For right now there was nothing she could do, except drink the tea. Maybe talk to her guest a bit. Perhaps she would take her mind off with the useless weighing she was doing. So, makes a sophisticated man like yourself want to come all the way from Europe to our little Otter Lake? Keith put his cup on the deck. As I told you, some things, but you don't travel all this way to see your great-grandfather came from in the dark. It's kind of strange, and something's haunting you, young man. I can see it. It's like the mighty weight of the world's on your shoulders. You're mighty young to have that look. Now, can I get the impression you can only get rid of by coming here? My son might buy your story, but I don't. Granny looked at him with curious eyes. You're a very weird man, Pierre Lawrence. I'm from Europe, he responded. I've met a lot of European people, except seen them on the television. But you ain't European like them, or anybody else for that matter. You're just different. Come on. What's your story? She paused and studied him closely. She wanted to answer her questions. Well, the woman was indeed intuitive. Perhaps a little too intuitive. Any other time, Pierre would have known how to handle the situation, but times had changed and there was a little more important things at hand. Instead, he decided to sprinkle his lives with a little of truth. Sometimes he can throw the most persistent tracker off the trail. He cleared his throat. I often hear my great-grandfather talk about our lake. So often I feel like I've been here. I'd actually walked among the trees, climbed the hills, felt the cold slap of the lake in the spring. They talked about it so much, I felt like I knew every ravine and hill, but obviously the place had changed. That's why I spent so much time wandering, trying to find familiar landmarks and such. The years can change a lot of things, and a lot of people. But why go about it at night? Wouldn't it be easier to see Otter Lake during the day? For old eyes, Grandma's sure could be piercing. I suffer from a condition called porphyria, but skin's sensitive to strong light. It can hurt. Modern medical science was providing him with a viable excuse. This wasn't just the first time somebody inquired about his unusual lifestyle. Granny Ruth thought about this for a moment before nodding her head. Sounds harsh, young man, but I wish more kids today had your connection to the land. 2 generations removed, and you still see him walk the land. So where did you grow up in Europe, I mean? Pierre cased his cold finger in the steaming tea. He could feel the warmth spread through the rest of his fingers. I lived in several countries, all over the continent, in fact. My family found it better to keep moving around a lot. I've lived in practically every country in Europe, come think of it. From Russia to Portugal, from Ireland to Romania. But in that Monaco place where the Princess Grace used to live, she asked eagerly. Yes, a few times actually. How about Italy? I see beautiful pictures of it. Granny Ruth always harbored a secret desire to see that country. The food, the history, and the scenery captivated her. Just to the left of the house, a skunk sniffed the air, trying to figure what the aroma was flowing on the wind. Skunks were not very familiar with tea. I once spent 60 years there. It took a moment for Pierre's words to sink to Granny's consciousness. What'd you say? So I once spent 6 years there. I was younger. Then split off several sentences in Italian, telling her what a charming woman she was and thanking her for the tea. That sounds so pretty. More people of your generation are so lucky. I don't think I ever got to run 2 hours from this place, and you've been to all those wonderful places. As she, t- uh, as she talked to sip of tea, Pierre slowly poured us through the seams of the deck, as quietly as possible. To his sense of hearing, it sounded like Niagara Falls, but Granny Ruth didn't seem to notice. How old are you, by the way? She asked. But for a moment, Granny Ruth Pearson lost in thought, waiting for a few seconds. I was 23 the last time I mattered. So young and so much still to see still. Once more, Pierre seemed 1,000 miles away. This time he spoke slower, and with the odd depth to his voice, perhaps. What do you think you do when you see it all? Owen smiled. I don't think there's possible, young man. There was no smile in Pierre's voice. All things are possible. Sometimes you don't even want to see anymore. Sometimes you see enough. Sometimes you just want to go to sleep. He caught a look at him. Metaphorically, of course. So serious, a young man like you. Never say stuff like that to an old woman. This might come true. There's still a few things I have yet to see in this big world. I ain't going anywhere quite so soon. She found herself wagging her finger at him. Pierre couldn't help but smile at the old woman's feistiness. Good for you. Her point being made, Grandruth heaved her sizable bulk up out of her chair, gathered up an empty cup. And what do you know? You're not even a third of the way through your life. I've got underwear older than you. If you say so. They were quiet for a moment, both lost in their thoughts on this cool fall night. Granny Ruth finally broke the silence. Tell me, Pierre, your European grandparents ever tell you about the Wendigo? In the semi-darkness of the patio, she could see him nod. What did they tell you? Demons. Or monsters. Cannibals whose souls are lost. They eat and eat. Anything and everything. And everybody. They never get satisfied. In fact, the more they eat, the bigger they get. And the bigger their appetite becomes. It's a never-ending cycle. Or circle. They become giant, ravenous creatures marauding across the countryside, laying waste to it. They come in wintertime from the north. That's one story. Another say there were once humans who, during winter when food was scarce, resorted to cannibalism. But in the flesh of humans, they condemned themselves to aimless wanderings, trying to feed a hunger that could not be satisfied. Lost in the story, her mind back to the time when her own grandmother would tell her these tales, Granny Ruth unconsciously slipped an Anishinaabe. But Pierre scarcely noticed. He was listening too intently. Some say the only way to kill one is to burn with fire, to melt their frozen heart. Only then will they be destroyed and free. Again, silence descended on the patio. This time Pierre broke it. Why are you telling me this now? He asked in English. This brought Grimmett back to the patio, to the tea, to now. I don't know, you just seem to be doing quite a bit of wandering yourself. I can't get the hint of something in you that's not satisfied. Am I a crazy old woman? Or am I a clever old woman? She gave Pierre a look that was teasing, yet at the same time inquisitive. L'errant is French for wanderer, was all he said. Imagine that, was Graham's response. I want some more tea. How's your cup doing? I'm quite fine, thank you. Suit yourself. She opened the screen door and had one foot were sobbing. Without turning to said, Pierre, I accept your regards tonight during your wanderings, quite probably. If you happen to run across my granddaughter, I know what to do. A lone and already missing girl, wandering in the dark and dangerous woods. It was almost as if the fates were taunting him. Under normal circumstances, he would have taken advantage of the situation, or simply walked away in search of less obvious prey. But these were not normal circumstances. Also, the smell of the old woman, though so tantalizingly close, was due to driving him to distraction. Granny Ruth was far older than most of the people who generally have caused attention. But the thirst in his throat, the aching in his belly, made him aware of the almost thundering beat of her heart. The sound fled his sensitive ears. It was all he could do to gently put down the cup. Thank you. Granny Ruth finished crossing through the doorway into the living room. She turned around to close the screen door. I'm sorry there's no reason for the finish sentence, for the deck was now deserted, except for this empty cup in the arm of a wooden chair, and the stray scattered beams of moonlight dancing in the wood. Though her ears were old, she could still hear his presence well. The dried leaves and dead underbrush that surrounded the house told her nothing of any travelers. Must have been in a hurry, she said aloud. Not for the first time, she had thought about how unusual their house guest was. He sure could move fast to the bush really good, like one of those old-fashioned Indians from long ago. So I'm going to leave you chapter 22, which looks at Tiffany, on your own. That's as far as you have to read for this lesson. We're going to jump to our lesson now. We won't get this done today. We'll start it, though. Let's look at different types of conflict. So conflict in novels and short stories refers to the different drives of the main characters or forces involved. Conflict can be either internal or external. That is, it can occur within a character's mind or between a character and exterior forces. Conflict is mostly visible between two or more characters, usually a protagonist and an antagonist, an enemy, or a villain, but can occur in many different forms. A character may easily find himself or herself in conflict with a natural force, such as an animal, or a weather event like a hurricane. The purpose of this conflict is to create tension in the story, making readers more interested in the story before leaving them uncertain of which of the character forces will prevail. There may be multiple points of conflict in a single story, as characters may have more than one desire or may struggle against more than one opposing force. When a conflict is resolved, and the reader discovers the force the character succeeds, it creates a sense of closure. Conflicts may resolve at any point in the story, particularly when more than one conflict exists, but not all stories resolve every conflict. So there's four main types of conflict. We have and the most common one that we come across is person against person. So this involves stories where characters are against each other. This is an external conflict. The conflict may be a direct opposition, as in a gunfight or robbery, or it may be a more subtle conflict between the desires of two or more characters, as in a romance or in a family epic. The next one is person against society. Now, this is when a person stands against a man-made institution. Slavery, bullying, racism are examples. Person against person may shame the person against society. In such stories, characters are forced to make moral choices or frustrated by social rules and meet their goals. They are fighting against what society expects them to do, or against the stereotypes and prejudices that have been created about them. Our third type is person against nature. This is an external struggle, pitting the hero against an animal or a force of nature, such as a storm or an animal. And finally, you have person against self. So this is an internal struggle. It occurs in the character's mind. A character must overcome their own nature or make a choice between two or more paths. Normally, that's either the good or the evil. Logic and emotion are the typical ones you tend to come across. So leads to the key question 27. This is a fairly big question. So what you are doing is look at different types of conflict that exist in the novel. So now that we have looked at different types of conflict, you're going to examine 5 characters from the novel and explain what types of conflicts they are having. You will need to identify the type of conflict as a person against person, person against self, etc. And describe the events and actions that have occurred around that conflict. Now, you must examine the conflicts that Tiffany, Pierre, and Keith are facing. You have to do those 3. The other 2 are up to you. Your answer should be written in sentence and paragraph form, and each sentence should be 1 to 2 paragraphs. The ones with Tiffany and Pierre and Keith tend to be a couple of paragraphs. There's 2 minor here tend to be 1. So we have an example done here for Kim, Darla's cousin and friend. So our first example says Kim is involved in 2 conflicts. Person against person and person against society. She's in a person versus person conflict with Tiffany, who is constantly ignoring her to spend time with Tony. This makes her feel left out and angry at Tiffany for ditching her to spend time with Tony. Her second conflict is person against society. She wants to go to Vancouver to become a lawyer, but doesn't want her ambitions to become known. Now, this is where it's against society, because society has established a stereotype or belief that Ojibwe girls don't become lawyers. So she's fighting against that. She's trying to work against that stereotype and prove that stereotype wrong. And she's doing that in order to reach her goals. Another one is, can you do one for two ones we would do it for Granny Ruth and Tony are the ones that other 2 that most students do for the 2 optional ones. Key Kitchen 28. We'll look at that later. So the example here is Kim. What I want to do now is I want to do another example, just give you a bit of detail. So we're going to do an example using Tony. So you can do this either on a computer or you can do it on line paper. If you do it on a computer, you can email it or send it to me through Facebook. If you do it on regular paper, you can have your DEC scan or fax it in. So we're going to look at Tony. And I'll make this a bit bigger so it's easy to see. So let's think about what conflicts is Tony involved with. So Tony is in a person against person. He's fighting against Keith because Keith doesn't like him dating his daughter. Is he going against nature? Not really. Against society? Yeah. Because he's dating a First Nations girl, and society doesn't normally accept that. Is he against himself? Not really. So we can say Tony is facing two conflicts. He's dealing with a person against person conflict with Keith and Tiffany. He is in conflict with Keith because he is dating Tiffany and Keith doesn't like him. He has created a scarecrow that looks like Tony and shoots at it. So he has his target practice with it. He is also in a conflict with Tiffany when he breaks up with her. When he breaks up with her. He's cheating on her. Sure, Julie. He and Tiffany get into a fight about it. And that probably he is also facing a person against society conflict because he is dating a First Nations girl. He is white, and it's not done. Outside of each other's races. So that's our example for Tony. So we'll leave off there. We'll pick up with the rest of lesson 8 on Monday. We should get the whole thing done. And then we'll get, if we get a chance, we'll start looking at lesson 9, which is the rest of the novel. I expect we'll probably get started with that Monday. And we'll probably look at having the entire novel probably finished either by the end of next Thursday's class or by the middle of the following week after that. So we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I'd like to thank everyone who called in and joined me. If you do have any questions, sure let me know, and I'll answer all the questions. I'll be in the office tomorrow from 8:30 until 2:30 Central, 9:30 to 3:30 Eastern. Other than that, everyone have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you everyone on Monday. Until then, miigwech, and bye for now.